Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready for rapid fire, but this Wendy's breakfast in the chat right now.
I know. See, like this tells you where everyone's minds went, during some of that.
But I just think it's funny because when I left the emergency room a couple of days ago, I was starving and they kept pumping me with medicine. So my stomach was just like, just like, when like you get a lot of medicine you take a lot of medicine on empty stomach, you just kind of feel the gurgles. Well, I hadn't had anything for breakfast. So I stopped at Wendy's actually and got some Wendy's breakfast. So it made me think of that when they started.
Was it good? I don't think I've ever had Wendy's breakfast before.
It got the job done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm a classic McDonald's guy. Give me a good sausage McGriddle or whatever it might
sausage
be.
Biscuit.
Yeah, sausage biscuit, but it got the job done. Can't complain.
Yeah. All right. Let's get a Notre Dame football question. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Marcus Freeman said today that center Zeke Correll practiced all week and he's going to play Saturday. He's going to start against Navy.
It's fantastic news. When we talked about this kind of a week and a half ago and we were kind of given our, I would say, overreaction Tuesday of, Zeke Correll not playing and the possible implications, the center is like the linebacker of the offense. He's got to be able to set the runner pass, protection, be able to call out blitzes, be able to, work with his fellow offensive linemen in a weave, nice flow type of system where they're just picking up and calling out blitzes. And I think all of that starts with your center. And so when you have your starting center in there, you have your starting quarterback in there, everyone's on the same page. Everyone's, being able to recognize and call out the plays that are required. And I just think in a game where assignments are really, really important, that's, when you play the Naval Academy or any of the academies, you have to play really assignment sound football. And you want your starting center in there for that reason, because he's going to get you to your assignment.
That's absolutely right. And to have him in the middle with both guards who are going to be making their first starts, I just think that it is huge. So now you've got the guy making the calls in the middle of the line with all of the experience that he has, and you've got the tackles on the outside with all the experience that they have. That's just that much more kind of safety net for those two guards making their way through their first career start out there against what is not necessarily a complex defense, but it is a defense that is going to play you physical. They're going to be tenacious. They're going to keep coming at you. They're going to do at least some unusual things. So I think that it's so vital that Notre Dame is going to be able to have Zeke Correll out there on Saturday.
And like you said, when you got and another important aspect is when you have two first-time starters at the guard position, they need to be able to rely on the center, right? Like that's their guy. And he provides that experience. And I think he provides some of that comforting feeling again for first-time starters. And again, I mean, they're on a big stage, right? Like even though the opponent, you could say what you want of the opponent, they're still playing in Ireland. It's still a big deal. A lot of people are going to be there. It's probably the most, impactful, important game of the week 0 games. Like there's still a lot riding on this game, and so having a guy like Zeke Correll there to kind of maybe calm some of those nerves is very important.
Here's what I want to know. Trader Z, I pray no serious injuries. I think everyone's in on that for Notre Dame, and both Angeli and Minchie get to play. So are we going to be on Angeli Minchie watch every week? Like, is that how this whole season's going to go?
When you have a situation like last year, there's just lingering PTSD that carries over into the next season.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, it is Navy. I don't know that they're necessarily going to go out there and keep slinging the ball around if it gets to the point where Angeli and or Minchie get out there. I would doubt very, very much that Kenny Minchie sees the field in this game.
Yeah, it's going to be the Hartman and Angeli show. And like I told you, and we'll get into, oh man, I hope everyone joins our show tomorrow because I'll have a whole betting segment of my own, but they're going to let Sam Hartman light it up. And then I think you're going to see Angeli take it into the house or, into the shed or however you want to say it. You know what I mean? They'll really build it up, let Sam Hartman cook, let him get comfortable, and then let Steve Angeli kind of ride off into the sunset with the rest of the game, I think is what you'll see. You'll hit that D-cell, when Steve Angeli kind of comes in there towards the end.
By the way, while Zeke Correll will play this week, Eli Raridon will not. We had a question about Eli Raridon earlier this week, and Marcus Freeman said today that Raridon's target date to return is the North Carolina State game, week 3, September 9th. So no Eli Raridon, and I think that's a good thing. They've got Holden Stays. They've got Mitchell Evans. They've got Davis Sherwood as the number 3 guy right now. I don't think that there is any reason to try to push Eli Raridon back 1 minute, 1 game, 1 week, 1 day too soon after he's had ACL tears of the same knee 2 years in a row.
Yeah, and they have plenty of depth at the tight end position. There's bodies there, and it's not really there's not a lot of separation between that tight end room, right? And so if you have a lot of bodies and there's not a lot of separation between the bodies that are in there, there's no reason to push a guy, especially with those prior kind of injuries in a physical type game for no reason almost.
Yeah. How will you define a successful season for Notre Dame football this year? Is it, and this is basically your minimal expectation, like minimally, how will you define a successful season for Notre Dame?
Yeah, I define a successful season for Notre Dame of 1, doing better than last year. What that means is they were 8-4 last year. I would like them at very worst, and I'm not saying this is what I would determine to be successful, but you at least have to go 9-3 in my opinion. A successful season is 10 wins, and whatever bowl appearance kind of comes off of that. And I think if you get 10 wins, you're probably looking at some sort of New Year's 6 type bowl game. So I will say personally for me, getting better and getting to a 10-win kind of crest and being in some sort of New Year's 6 type game. And that's the basement for me. The ceiling is, of course, I still have the expectation that they're contending for a national championship as 11-1 team, and a perfect world, a 12-0 team.
Yeah, the ceiling is a playoff, I think. But I think my minimal expectation is not just get to a New Year's 6 bowl, but win a New Year's 6 bowl. It's time.
Yeah, I'd like to add that amendment to mine too, because they've had plenty of appearances in the last 2 decades, but they haven't won any of those New Year's 6 games. Yes. So I would say 10 wins and the 11th win being in the New Year's 6 game.
Exactly. That's what I'm looking at. 10-2 season and get to, or not get to, but win a New Year's 6 bowl, because that means you're going to be playing another quality opponent. They had that opportunity a couple of years ago. They got to the bowl, but again, they weren't able to win it because they weren't able to hold on in the second half. So,
yeah, and it's interesting.
Time to get over the hump.
You asked this question because I saw something, I think yesterday. I've had a lot of time to myself in these last 4 days. It's been a lot
apparently so
laying down and being on my phone. So I've been going through a lot of stuff. Notre Dame was predicted to play Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl, I believe, is where their prediction is at right now. So just kind of throwing that out there. Take what you want. I know it's, haven't played a game yet, but that's the prediction for where people are seeing them kind of fall by the end of the season.
So longtime college football writer Pat Forde of Sports Illustrated said on the College Football Inquirer podcast this week, he wonders if Marcus Freeman was too nice in his first season as head coach. I don't think he's completely alone in this. He was obviously a popular assistant coach, popular with the team, and then he got the promotion. Forde asked Freeman when he was in town a couple of weeks ago if he was meaner to his assistants this offseason. Freeman said, well, not meaner, but more demanding. So what do you think of all this?
I think this is just that's the Marcus Freeman. That's who Marcus Freeman is. That's the perfect kind of response. When things get bad under Marcus Freeman's, I guess, oversight or control, it's not, Marcus Freeman doesn't just start yelling and getting mad at people and blaming other people. It's a lot of self-reflection and then realizing what he needs more out of, what he needs to demand out of his coaches, demand what he needs out of his players. And so I think it's a great response. And I think it's a response that also makes a ton of sense, because if you're going to work forward and you're going to make, fix mistakes, because no one's going to be perfect. Things are going to go wrong. They're going to have to fix things on the fly. You need a relationship that is a good relationship, right? And so if you're just yelling and barking at someone, I don't know about you, but when someone's yelling and barking at you, there's hesitancy to kind of want to cooperate in a way that is most productive, right? And so when there's mutual respect and it's, hey, we need to have a conversation of, we're not doing what we need to do right now, we need more out of you. I think that's different than just ripping into someone and getting mad and saying,
right,
figure this out, essentially. So I'd love that response on Marcus Freeman's behalf.
You can be a nice guy, but you can also still be demanding when you're out there on the field.
Right.
And I think that he was. And I think that some people, and I don't know if it was because we got so used to seeing Brian Kelly and some of his stuff on the sidelines, like that Marcus Freeman was supposed to show all this emotion to be a good head coach. I don't think you necessarily need that. But at the same time, because of the relationships that he had, especially with assistants, going from being an assistant coach who was on the staff to now all of a sudden you've got guys who are essentially your peers you've elevated on the food chain, and all of a sudden they're working for you. So I think that there's a little bit of a kind of a push and pull on how you're going to handle that as an assistant, especially as well liked as Marcus Freeman is, and it just sort of how that dance was going to go. And so it makes sense that sort of after a season to sort of feel that out, and he found out about himself in a lot of different ways as a head coach last year, whether it was on game day, on Monday, on Tuesday, whatever, with all those relationships, all the stuff working with guys who are now, again, working under him, as well as the players. But now, going into year 2, it's like, okay, I've got to expect more. I need more from you in this facet. I think that he kind of had to learn the buttons that needed to be pushed. And even, we've talked about it, even out there with some of the emotion that he was showing when he was talking to his team, kind of trying to fire them up before practices this year, when he was getting out there and, kind of getting on them a little bit, trying to motivate them a little bit. So I think that he's figuring out what buttons that he needed to be pushed. I don't think you can just, like you said, you just can't come out firing and you're yelling and you're pushing, doing all this stuff all at once, especially when you've shown that that's not necessarily your personality.
Right.
Got to stay true to who he is, I think. So according to multiple reports, Stanford, Cal, and SMU are now seriously being considered for membership in the ACC. ACC is expected to get an extra $2.2 million per school annually if they're to add these 3 teams. And all 3 of them are willing, apparently, to take a greatly reduced revenue share in their first few years of the agreement if they are indeed accepted into the ACC, with SMU saying we don't need money for the first 7 years, which is like, shows you how much money SMU has. But so Notre Dame has been pushing for this to happen. So if it happens, what benefit do you see in the Irish, or what impact do you see on this for Notre Dame?
I would just like to say I proposed this idea about 2 weeks ago, and it's kind of coming to fruition. So mark one down in the win category, first of all. But second of all, I don't see this as something that's like a clear cut paste or cut and dry. Notre Dame helps them and Notre Dame gets X out of it as a reward, right? I think this is similar to kind of like Notre Dame and Navy, right? Like the reason why that this rivalry or series of games have gone on so long is because
Stanford or with Navy. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Notre Dame, helped Navy, and Navy in turn helped Notre Dame, and that's kind of been, they just kind of had each other's backs going forward, right? And I think that's a similar situation with Stanford and Cal. I don't think Notre Dame really expects anything out of this. Jack Schwarbrick has just been on the record saying, we can't leave some of these academically prestigious institutions left out of this. just because, they're not as appealing to these big media markets and the money that's being drawn from these. So I just think it's kind of like brothers having each other's backs, ultimately. And, sure, I think it helps Notre Dame down the road potentially if things fall out with NBC and they have to join a conference, right? And it looks really good to the ACC. Notre Dame's helped them in the past. They've allowed their Olympic sports to participate in the ACC, etc. So again, I don't see it being some sort of like big reward that Notre Dame's getting out of this. I just think it's a lot of respect and a lot, again, kind of like a brotherhood of, we have your back. And then hopefully Notre Dame would say, maybe 20 years down the road, for whatever reason, if Notre Dame found itself in a hole, that these kind of institutions would help them, get out of the hole. I think that's more of what I'm looking at here.
Cal and Stanford specifically, since that's who Notre Dame has been playing every year for a couple of decades now. There are other academic schools, and Notre Dame is kind of going to bat trying to help out these academic schools. And I'm not saying that this is what I'm about to say is the reason that Notre Dame is pushing for this, but I kind of started thinking about, okay, what happens if Stanford specifically gets into the ACC? Well, you're not going to be playing Stanford every year anymore. That's going to go away. You're still going to be playing Stanford on a rotation because they're just going to become part of the ACC rotation, just like Notre Dame used to have fairly regular series with both Boston College and Pittsburgh. Once those schools joined the ACC, they weren't playing them every year again. They play them as part of the ACC rotation, and that will happen with Stanford as well. So if you're like me, and I know Vince is in this boat as well, and you're not necessarily that thrilled about seeing Stanford every year, then if Stanford is in the ACC, they're just going to become part of the ACC rotation. So you'll still play Stanford every few years, but you're not going to be playing them all the time. And like I said, it opens up other opportunities. Like I have said, replace Stanford with UCLA, for example, in that every year rotation. So now every year, if you've got USC and UCLA, every year you're going to Southern California, Los Angeles, and every year you've got one of those two schools coming here. Now, will that happen? I don't know. But if Stanford is in the ACC, that ends the annual series between those two teams. Now, that obviously means you're going to pick up Cal, you're going to pick up SMU. But for Notre Dame, it also means that there are other sports. They're going to be doing more traveling by going to the West Coast to play Cal and Stanford. But their other sports are going to kind of get to make more appearances out there on the West Coast, which is still a good recruiting hotbed. So I think that there are definitely some benefits for Notre Dame and some different impacts for Notre Dame if all this actually does come to pass.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. I think there's a bunch of kind of little rewards, spread out here, there, everywhere. But I guess the main point I was trying to make is there's not just one big overarching, this is what Notre Dame gets out of it type situation at the end of the day.
Yeah, this comment from Trader Z, the North Carolina, that's actually the women's soccer coach, said that he didn't want Cal and Stanford. The ACC wanted them to die in the vine so they don't recruit against him. Yeah, and I mean,
come on, that's just being lazy.
Let's be honest. None of this is driven by what's going on with the soccer programs or the baseball programs or the softball or anything else. This is driven by football. So he's going to have to live with it just like everybody else. He's got a few national championships out there, but let's just be honest. Nobody cares what the soccer coaches think in all this. It's just a fact.
It's just the way it is.
Yep. Jesse, besides quarterback, what position will make the most improvement for Notre Dame this season?
So I think this question goes hand in hand with how you think the season's going to, with the outcome of the season, and what's going to happen with the offense and Sam Hartman. I think if Sam Hartman is going to have a big year and they're going to throw for a lot of yards and have a lot of touchdowns, well, what's that mean? Wide receivers got to step up, catch the ball, and for, whatever it is, touchdowns, short yardage, big plays, whatever it might be. So I think that to answer this question, it's most definitely 100% the wide receiver room.
How did I know you were going that direction? I mean, yeah, it makes sense because they do go hand in hand. I'll just say the defensive line though, because I think the defensive line was good last year. It was solid.
It was
Anyway.
average and got the job done, but it didn't go over the top in any way.
Exactly. And I think that this year's defensive line has a really good chance to go over the top and just be great. It has a chance to be maybe the best defensive line we've seen in the last 10 or 11 years at Notre Dame. And they've obviously sent some guys to the NFL from that defensive line. And so I just really high on it on the defensive line. I think it is going to be vastly improved this season. I think you're right. The receiving room is also going to look a lot better this year because they've got that quarterback to get them the football. So those would be like defensive line would be my one, receivers would be my number two. Fill in the blank. You would fill blank if Notre Dame does not cover its current 20.5-point spread against Navy Saturday.
I wouldn't feel, I wouldn't feel like too horrible about it, right? Because like I've been looking at, first of all, Notre Dame and spreads, not a fun game to play.
Not last year it wasn't.
Not a fun game to play at all. But I started to look at the history. I like to go in 20-year samples, so we'll go back to 2003. I'm counting right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Out of 20 matchups in the last 20 years, Notre Dame has covered that spread only 8 times.
8 times.
8 times. So if we're going by, Notre Dame's history of really not being a good spread team, and then looking at Notre Dame versus Navy in the last 20 years, and they've only covered that spread 8 times, I wouldn't be too worried about it. But it is the first game of the year, and when Notre Dame beats Navy, they thump Navy, right? Like it's usually either relatively kind of close, or it's just a good old thumping. I think it's going to be a good old thumping this year. I wouldn't feel some type of way if they don't cover that spread, because I think the backups are eventually going to get in, and then triple option offense against backups is never really fun because it's a lot of assignment sound football, and who wants to play against a triple option team when you're trying to wrap up a game? You know what I mean?
Itself up for some backdoor covers for sure.
Right. And so Notre Dame could go up 24 and then, Navy sneak in a last second touchdown. Right. So I don't feel bad about it. I wouldn't feel bad about it, but I still think Notre Dame's going to thump them this year.
Yeah. Stymie, this is the point here. That great point that he's making. Are we talking barely not covering or barely getting the win? That's a great differentiation.
Yeah, and that's that's the best way to put this. If they win by 3 again this year, then yeah, there's concern. But if they win by 19 and they sneak in a last couple touchdowns while the backups are in, I don't feel bad about that.
That's why you don't touch that line.
You don't touch the spread. Don't mess with the spread.
That's right. You can go point total, but don't touch the spread on this. Let's find out a little bit about this team first, after their history of not being able to cover last year. That's exactly right. Fill in the blank. Notre Dame's season over-under win total remains 8.5. It'll be blank if they don't go over on that.
It'll be stage 2 meltdown if they don't go over 8.5 wins this year, because
Under
that means
9 wins. Are you kidding me?
That means you're at least 8-4 again this year. And what I said, you asked me a little bit ago, what I deem a successful season. Staying stagnant and not showing growth, that's not a successful season. I'm just gonna point blank say I'm putting a lot on that over 8.5 win total this year, and I'm thinking about even bumping it up to 9.5. And being at the 10 win mark this season. So I am very confident that this team is a 9-win team at minimum, and I think everyone else should too. I don't see them having another 8-4 season, and it would be very disappointing if that was the case.
It would be disappointment of disappointments to have back-to-back, at best, 8-4 seasons in the first 2 years of a new head coach after all that this program has done the previous 5 years. And then you add a quarterback like Sam Hartman, all these different things. You go 8-4 again. That means that not only are you, and then we have to start talking about who are the wins against, who are the losses against. Because are you going to be like last year where you beat a Clemson and maybe even knock off Ohio State and or USC, but then you're losing games that you're not supposed to lose. That's where it gets even dicier. Who are you? And then the conversations start changing really quickly. So it would be stage 5 DEFCON. We're having some serious conversations here if we're talking about not even winning 9 games again. Yeah, Jason says he'd put it on the over if it's 8.5, and that's,
I'm doing that, baby.
It just seems too easy, but there are still people, like I was watching a gambling show last week, and they're talking about under on Notre Dame, and it's just, I don't know, like I don't know. I realize, okay, you lose this production, and I don't know what else Vegas is putting all this on right now, because
I think the only thing that would make sense, because I think their defense is going to be fine. I think they're going to have a great defense, a ton of experience, ton of depth. I think that their offensive line will be great. I think Sam Hartman will be great. I think the only thing that could potentially hold them back is what is a new first-year offensive coordinator going to look like? If that completely falls on its face, then that could be obviously very detrimental to this team. But I don't foresee that, but I would see that as being kind of the big thing that I think others are looking at is, can this offense really come together with all of the new pieces and be, prolific and high scoring like we think they're going to be?
So, Jess, final one for you tonight. The Little League World Series has dominated ESPN for the last week or so. Scale of 1 to 10, how into it are you?
I'm not going to lie. This is like a 0 out of 10. I haven't watched 1 minute. I haven't watched 1 second. It's just, it's a great experience for those kids. And I loved, when I was a kid playing on all-star teams, trying to make it all the way down to the Little League World Series. But outside of that and the families that are, participating, there's just not a lot of interest. It's not good baseball. There's not good umpires. And I say it's not good baseball because it's just not, professional or college baseball, right? Like you see kids making errors and I know they're giving their best effort and, competition and they're good for their age and et cetera, but it's just it's still not super enjoyable to watch. So
I just always found it, it's okay, Little League. And it's just when you think about the fact that they are televising and they put all this money into these games, they're televising all these games. It is a random age group in a random league, basically, that they have decided to highly publicize and put on TV, basically so that we can watch what ESPN tells us we should be watching. There are a lot of other age groups and, leagues and baseball, out there that are, as you said, that are actually better baseball than what you're seeing out there. And I'm not trying to slam on the Little League or whatever. I'm just not into it. And personally, there's been no PTI for the last couple of weeks because of the fact that all these games are on. And then I go to my
Kornheiser and Wilbon must love that World Series week. It's vacation week for them.
Yeah, I go to my DVR and it says that PTI is supposed to be on. So guess what happens? I flip it over there and guess what's on? A Little League World Series game is still on when it says PTI is supposed to be on. So I'm sorry. And I know it's great for the kids, great experience.
That's what I mean. I understand.
I'm not trying to knock it. I'm just not into it at all.
Derek brought up a good point here. Me being sick this week sucked because the Dodgers were in town, and me, I like to go see games like that because I get to see Freddie Freeman, like Mookie Betts, stuff like that. So I was sad that I missed out, but I had a buddy. So Kershaw was supposed to pitch. What's today? Thursday?
Yeah.
Kershaw was supposed to pitch Tuesday, the season opener. They moved him to Wednesday. Wednesday's game yesterday got rained out after 3 innings. So Kershaw's start not only got moved, but then it gets washed out by the rain. And so Cleveland fans only got to see like 2 or 3 innings of Kershaw pitching get dumped on with rain, and that's about it. So it's been a rainy, messy series against the Dodgers. I'm kind of glad I was a little sick because I think it'd have been frustrating trying to manage these different games this week.
Is it as hot and muggy in Cleveland right now the last couple of days as it's been here in South Bend?
To be honest with you, I have not been outside
No,
all that much.
Probably
but when
lucky.
I've been outside, it's hard for me to say because I've had the fever sweats, right? And so like everything has felt hot to me. I'm just walking around sweating everywhere.
I got up this morning and all the windows on the house were steamed outside.
Ooh, that's how you know it's hot, because the air is mixing from the coldness on the inside and the hotness on the outside.
Yep, that's right. All right, well, that's going to do it for today and this week. We do have, again, don't forget, we've got the Countdown to Kickoff show coming up. The YouTube video will be up Friday night, and the podcast, the audio podcast, will drop Saturday morning, both the main portion of the show as well as the rapid fire portion of the show. So we've got that coming up for our pregame show, and of course there'll be a live postgame show after Notre Dame Navy as well. Tommy Guns!
He said that there's some mailbag question in here that you didn't get to, but
throw the question up there again. See, that's like he like slips stuff in early and I don't see it, and then he gets mad. So I didn't see a question.
You have 30 seconds before we shut this down.
That's right. Get your question in.
Oh, here we go. I found it. It says, Sean, can you please explain to Jesse that Swarbrick, how I've been saying it, and Schwarber are pronounced the same on the front end?
Yes. Swarbrick. There's no 8 or there's no CH in Swarbrick. Schwarber, Swarbrick. There you go. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tommy, for pointing that out. Maybe Jack Swarbrick will appreciate that as well.
Also, for a lot of people who have questions constantly about Notre Dame's, media and whether they join a conference or not, there's a really good interview with Dan Patrick and Jack out there. So and he answers a lot of those questions that I think people have had kind of lingering, and it's good to hear it straight from the mouth. So if you get bored, that's a good interview to kind of throw on.
I saw part of it. I actually went to the podcast today, and I saved that. He's got Dan Patrick show does like a best of where they put their interviews. So it's got Swarbrick and I can't remember if it's got Quinn or Freeman. It's got one of the two, and then there were a couple others. So Freeman was on there, I think, today. Brady Quinn was on yesterday. A lot of Notre Dame stuff out there, and with Dan Patrick in Dublin this week. Pretty cool. Good life.
Yeah.
Good one to live. All right, hit the like button on your way out, subscribe, rate, and review, and we will talk to you on the Countdown Show on IB Nation Sports Talk.